University of Münster, Germany. He was a postdoctoral fellow at Max Planck Institute for Chemical Physics of Solids, Germany, and Northwestern University, USA. Later, Dr. Peter joined as a faculty fellow at New Chemistry Unit, JNCSR, Bangalore in 2010. His broad research interests include the development of solid-state inorganic materials for various applications, ranging fuel cell, carbon dioxide reduction, and in condensed matter physics. May I invite Dr. Peter to the dais. May I also request Dr. Binuja Thomas, Principal Scientist, KSCST, to kindly occupy her seat on the dais. We have a session, the focal theme lecture by Professor Indranil Manna and Professor Sebastian Peter in this hall. We have Professor M.K. Jairaj. We have our speakers, Professor Indranil Manna and Professor Sebastian Peter on the dais. And we have Dr. Binuja Thomas, Principal Scientist, KSCST. So we are beginning the session now. To welcome and introduce the speaker, Professor Indranil Manna and Professor Sebastian Peter, may I request Professor M.K. Jairaj, Chairperson, 37th Kerala Science Congress, to kindly welcome and introduce the speaker to the gathering. Sir, please.
Very good morning to one and all. Actually, good afternoon. I welcome all the participants for the 37th Kerala Science Congress. This is the first session, opening session, on the focal theme, Technology Transformation for Green Future. As all of you are aware of, climate change, scarcity of resources, and as Dr. Stephen Hawking has once mentioned, within 600 years, in 2600, Earth will be a sizzling fireball. All of you are aware of the climate change and the calamities associated with this climate change. And this Science Congress has the focal theme, which is Technology Transformation for a Green Future. And today, we have two apt persons, Professor Indranil Manna and Professor Sebastian Peter, to speak about on the focal theme. The first speaker is Professor Indranil Manna, Vice Chancellor of Birla Institute of Technology. I will introduce the speaker. Professor Indranil Manna is an accomplished academician and a researcher with a wide ranging of research interests in the field of microstructure, property, parameter, correlation in nanometric and amorphous solids. He has studied on laser plasma assisted surface engineering. He has more than 250 research publications and supervised more than 20 scholars. Professor Manna did his BE and MTech from IIT Kanpur, then PhD from IIT Kharagpur. He has acting as many committees. One of the important is the National Coordinator of Impacting Research Innovation Technology Imprint. He has been serving this and continued to serve this imprint. He has also served as a chairman of Research Council, CSIR, AMPRI Bhopal. I'm not listing all the achievements. He is also a recipient of many awards. I invite Professor Manna to give to speak on the focal theme.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all of you. Sorry for taking the tea away from you. I'm sure they'll serve you a better lunch and make it up. Would begin by thanking Professor Sudhir very sincerely for giving me this opportunity. I feel greatly honored to be speaking to you on this 37th Kerala Science Congress. Incidentally, this is not the first time I had an opportunity of addressing the Kerala Science Congress some years ago when Dr. Suresh Das was at the helm. Thank you very much, Professor Jayaraj, for the introduction and rest of the organizers. Incidentally, I have a flight not too far away, so I will try to be as brief as possible. I try to align myself with the focal theme of this Congress, which is towards the green future. The future is future, green or gray or blue. We need to take a realistic view, and that's exactly what I would like to do in the next half an hour or so. So the way I've planned my discourse is to begin with, we just ended with the national anthem, so just augurs well, to begin with a very famous quote of Tagore, unity in diversity, and that's very important for all of us who are into the field of science and technology to appreciate what he actually meant. Would like to also quote a very important slogan that the Honorable Prime Minister often reminds us, that India must emerge as developed nation by 2047. And I would like to present my own thesis as to what would it take for us to reach to that landmark. We'll talk about the various energy aspects. That's where I think most of these green or blue or gray aspects come up. And we'll take up a few other issues. By the way, I must also mention that I have the privilege of wearing two hats. I am currently associated with Birla Institute of Technology in Ranchi, Mesra. I also happen to have my association with IIT Kharagpur. This is now my 40th year. So if you look at the map of the country, it's hardly about 2.4% of the land mass of the whole world. And if you travel across east to west or north to south, every 100 or 200 kilometers we travel, we see a very drastic change in the people, language, food habit, social customs, habitat, complexion of the person, the social customs, and even in the same religion, the way a wedding ceremony is solemnized, you'd find a vast variation as you move from one state to the other. And yet we are a single nation. We used to be almost a subcontinent, and we are a nation. So whatever we plan to do or whatever we aspire to achieve for the nation, it's very fundamentally important that we first appreciate what is that nation that we want to make a difference to. And if you recall what one monk 150 years ago did, travel all the way from the east of the country down south to Trivandrum, to Kanyakumari by foot. All he did was to be able to try and understand the nation he belongs to, because he said, if I want to improve the quality of life, I must first know the state in which my people of the state belongs to. Of course, I'm referring to Swami Vivekananda. So we as scientists, I personally feel that it's primarily important that we know where we stand. We are a mighty nation, more than 5,000 years of recorded history. Used to be one of the richest nations until about the beginning of 18th century. And thanks to the foreign invaders, we were left in 300 years almost pauper by the time India achieved its independence in 47. So, as I said, it's a very large land with the largest and the youngest population in the world. And this is one single parameter that all of us must appreciate well and realize that if this country has one major resource that the entire world has reasons to envy, that is this human resource. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, always one feels proud to mention that, but at the same time, if you are pragmatic, you must also recall that in terms of our per capita income, we are way below. I'll come to some of those data later. So ISRO, very close by from this venue, made us immensely proud and continues to make us immensely proud. Atomic Energy did that years ago, and they continue to do that. Little do we understand and celebrate that India is the largest manufacturer of drug and pharmaceuticals, second largest producer of steel, cement, coal, third largest generator of electricity, and in terms of civil estate, fourth largest producer of the automobiles, and so on and so forth. So obviously, we not only are the largest population, but we also contribute to the overall global economy. But the flip side is that 28 states and 9 union territories, 22 official languages, I'm not talking about the dialects, 8 main religions, almost all religions that exist on the world exist in this country. I just quoted a number, 4.2 trillion US dollar, fifth largest economy, third largest in terms of the purchase power parity, but the per capita income is somewhere around 2,500 US dollar per year. India has done enormously well in terms of lifting the below poverty line population. We used to be about 20%, now we are at 5 or 6%, but the Human Development Index is a very meager 134th out of about 160, 65 nations in the world. There is unemployment. We are improving our condition in terms of innovation index, but still we are at 40th. You go to the Scandinavian countries like Finland, which has population less than the population of the big cities, metro cities in the country, they are the 5th or the 6th in terms of the innovation. The tiny little nation, Switzerland, is the number 1. So we have challenges. We have enormous amount of challenges of poverty, hunger, healthcare, security threats. India has a large deficit between the amount we export from the amount we import. And as a result, the GDP debt ratio is a staggering close to 60%. So majority of the issues that we talk about, in fact, including the green future that is a focal theme, in my opinion, has to be based on scientific fundamentals, but actually demands engineering intervention, be it water, energy, defense, education, everything. So if we really want to emerge as a developed nation by 2047, there are certain standard parameters that one needs to address to. So I have just picked up those like the economy of the country, the demography, political system, energy, healthcare, equity, and so on. So I have decided to place India in the middle and then compare ourselves with at least 2 nations who are way above us, and also picked up nations from different parts of the globe. So US, China, South Korea towards our east, and Sweden. So in terms of the economic parameters, we all know that the GDP-wise we are 5th in the whole world, but the GDP growth rate also is higher than most of the countries that we are comparing with. And that is where, even higher, much higher than China. So there was a time when the economists predicted that India would reach 2-digit economic growth rate. We are somewhere between 6 and 7%. This is even more promising than the absolute number of the economy that we have. But as I said, the per capita income is a huge matter of concern. The inflation rate is higher than most of these nations that I'm comparing with. The unemployment rate also is higher than almost all these nations that we are comparing with. The labor force participation rate is much lower than, so if you have 100 people how many of them are actually gainfully employed? Out of 100, it's 60 plus in US, 70 plus in China, about 70 in South Korea, and above 60 in Sweden, whereas in India it's less than 40. The government expenditure is very large and larger than percentage-wise some of the nations like China or South Korea and certainly Sweden. So precious resources that we have is spent to a large extent on defense import. In terms of demographics, the population or the so-called demographic dividend is something that we hear quite often. Population 1.43 billion is not the main key issue here. The key issue here is more than 800 million people are below the age of 35. So we are a nation which is not only the largest but also the youngest population-wise. So everybody is willing to contribute and is looking for an opportunity. And that's the biggest challenge, in my opinion, that this nation has today. But another very major difficulty that we face is, for example, the entire inauguration session, except some 10 or 15%, I'm born and brought up in this nation, I could hardly follow. And that's exactly the diversity that I was talking about. And this is a realistic, important factor that we all must be aware of. With the natural language processing, maybe soon we'll come in a situation where the dignitaries speak on any language in the nation, I automatically get it in my own mother tongue. But that's not immediately possible. We are very proud to have a political system which is entirely democratic, and the only other mighty nation that we can think of is the US, which has a similar structure. But compared to that, no matter how economically advanced China is, we certainly would not like to emulate what they have. And Korea, even the other day we saw, despite having such a robust and growing economy, they still are not away from the political turmoils. Even very recently they went through a similar. So by all means we should safeguard and protect this demographic system, political system that we have in this country. Education is the bedrock of any growth parameter anywhere in the world. And one single parameter, the gross enrollment ratio, in a certain age group, how many people of what percentage of the population has the right set of education. In primary, we have done very well. We are over almost 100% or certainly much above 95%. In the secondary level, school leaving level, we still are good. But at the tertiary level, though the figure is projected as 27% officially, but many of us believe that it may not be true. It may be still less than 20%. India's gross enrollment ratio has to reach over 30%. That's what the Prime Minister reminds us. And without that, some of us believe that no growth or no achievement will be sustainable in this country. In terms of number of universities or number of top-ranking universities and so on, there are concerns, and that's for another time to debate. But the point is that for a nation which is the largest population in the world, just having 1,000 universities, recognized universities, is certainly way too low. Energy and environment are the major concern. We are often reminded that India produces a large amount of carbon dioxide, which is going to harm the ozone layer and can actually put us to great danger, not just in this nation. If there's a big hole, the entire world is going to suffer. But then there is a flip side, and I'm going to refer to that soon. But what is important is, this is apparent contradiction, that India's emission, carbon dioxide emission per capita is the lowest among the 5 nations that I'm comparing with. Less than 2%, 1.9%. But multiplied by 1.4 billion makes it third largest global emitter of carbon dioxide. So it is globally important, not just for us in this nation, that we not only pursue seriously a course to find a solution, but nations who are well advanced in this aspect should also help India reduce its greenhouse gas emission. Water is another major concern. We don't quite realize, appreciate how precious a resource it is, and we all actually should take a very serious concern about the fact that a huge amount of water is wasted in agriculture, and that's something well within our reach. If you go to places somewhere in the northeast or down south along the coastal areas, or even many other parts of the country, I'm not necessarily going to the desert areas, water is really a major problem today. I mean, I have many other data and so on. In the interest of time, I'll just skip and say that India used to be contributing about 40% of its economy from manufacturing before independence. Today, we are way below 20%. And this is again something that no matter how much we rely upon the digital economy, the economic growth is never sustainable unless we have a very major thrust on manufacturing. And that, of course, is to be understood and appreciated well. Healthcare-wise, India has certainly scored a point. I mean, both in terms of the under 5 mortality rate, or in general, the infant mortality rate, India has improved its standing, and life expectancy is now comparable to the world average. So, compared to the time we started at the time of independence, India has made great strides in healthcare system, but certainly not to be complacent about. Some of these figures I have quoted earlier, so I'll skip them. Now I wanted to present before you something more interesting. Where we are, where we were at 1947, and if we are looking at 2047, so let's divide ourselves into 50 years since independence, 1997, the current situation, and 2047. So in terms of GDP, India will continue to grow at the rate of 6 to 7%. So we'll remain a mighty force. The population may cross 1.6 billion. Per capita income is going to rise. That's a good news, and it is bound to be a reasonable 12 lakh plus by the time we reach 2047. The gross enrollment ratio is projected to improve and go beyond. This figure that I'm quoting here is actually secondary, but when you go to tertiary, it should reach 30%. As I said, healthcare-wise, infant mortality or life expectancy-wise, we are doing better. Steel used to be an index of development. It still is. This is where I've been hearing for last maybe decades that India would produce 300 million tons of steel. We are nowhere close to that. The aviation market is booming, but India's own share in that is actually not very healthy. The road length, the rail length, the car production, and so on, all these things actually is improving, but we have a long way to go. Now, why is it that I wanted to quote this while talking about green future? It's because we have a very young and an aspiring population. Everybody wants education, opportunities, jobs, habitat, and mobility. All these are related to the Sustainable Developmental Goals. And these are the 17 all of us are aware of, the United Nations Charter. In all these, what we basically need, the basic needs, are the air, water, land, and sun. And we have to protect them. So that brings us to now the key issues related to the green future, or for that matter, the future of the not just this nation, but the entire humanity. If we could, there's abundant amount of sun, and we are one of those nations where we receive a good quantum of solar radiation. If we could convert, then certainly we could make a huge progress in terms of reduction of the greenhouse gas emission, and yet acquiring the energy security for the nation. So the two most cases where India is doing reasonably well is solar harvesting, not solar thermal, but solar photovoltaic, and wind. And one other third one I should have mentioned is the hydro. So this is how the world is going to move over a period of time. So let's say about 10 years ago, we were looking at about 25 trillion kilowatt hour as the total energy requirement of the entire world. And by another, let's say, 25, 30 years, this is supposed to grow about twofold. So 25 should become about 40. But what you should note here is that, I'm not sure whether, no, this doesn't work. If you look at the green bar, that's the hope, that's the future. Now, this is what is predicted, that what used to be just about 20% of the total energy consumption in the whole world is now over 50%. And this green bar should expand even more if we really want to ensure the future sustainability of the humanity. The dark figure, which is mainly for the natural gas, and the gray above, the coal, this put together is world average wise is less than 40% now. But in India, the situation is different. Let's say about 8 years ago, 60% of India's energy consumption used to come from coal alone. And if you add natural gas and so on, this would have been 2/3 of the entire energy consumption. Used to be about 320 gigawatt hour electricity, out of which 60% coming from coal. Large hydro was a major force, about 13-14%. But then we hear a lot about nuclear energy sources. India has the capability, one of the few nuclear energy harnessing nations, and not now, decades ago. But contribution coming from the nuclear nuclear sector is not even 2%. And it's not growing. Compared to the overall percentage, it's shrinking, which is a major question common people would always ask. Why is this happening? But the good thing is that hydroelectricity-wise, we are the 7th largest in the world, and capacity-wise. We have the 3rd largest number of dams. Now, the environmentalists are not quite happy about this number. I live in a small state of Jharkhand these days, and there's a very famous river many of you would have heard called Suvarnrekha. Only the other day, because of certain reasons, the State Council consulted me, and I was told that there are 8 dams located in the small stretch of Suvarnrekha only within Jharkhand, not counting Odisha. So obviously, water is precious resource, but environmentalists will explain to us as to why stopping the flow actually is causing not only just huge ecological imbalance, but also many other major problems for the society. Solar energy is a fast-growing industry. Wind power, we are the 4th largest. Biofuel is a major happening area, but coal is something which is worrisome, but also must realize that is the major driver for the economy in the country, the 5th largest reserves in the world. But the matter of concern is that the most of the good quality coal has already been consumed, and now we have to go for deep mining to unearth the remaining reserve. More recently, 2023 data shows certain improvement. The dependence on coal and natural gas is now about 50%, not 60 or 2/3. The dependence on hydro or wind or solar, this is on the rise, about 30%. So we are now in a situation where 50% from the carbon-bearing resources, 30% from the renewables, but nuclear is 1.6%. So obviously we need to improve upon. Now when we talk of the future energy consumption, because there's no life without energy, but before that, this also is a very important comparison. In 2 decades, 2000, 2010, and let's say 2020, the population has increased enormously, GDP has grown substantially. The energy demand has grown equally. But when we now look at the key parameters of human aspiration and requirement, let's say GDP per capita. So the deeper green is 2000 data, and the weaker green is the 2020 or 19 data. So you see that the GDP per capita has increased almost twofold, from about 22% to 44%. Energy demand per capita has risen by about 50%, but this level is actually, by the way, the scale on the left is the global average, the global standard. So even if India's energy consumption has improved and the quantum of energy coming from renewables has improved, but we are less than 35% of the world average. It used to be less than 20% of the world average. So I'm not talking about the energy consumed per capita in the energy-rich nations like US or Russia or Scandinavia. I'm talking about world average. India consumes per capita even 40% of the world average. The steel and cement, which are very good progression indices for the industry and manufacturing, we are 40% of the world average, but we emit CO2 per capita. I told you that from the world average, it's per capita is fairly low, but global, the overall quantum wise, we are emitting nearly 40% of the entire world. So obviously the answer lies in the renewables. And that is where the good news is that India now ranks third in terms of the increase in its capacity of renewable energy generation. And this is primarily happening in three courses: the solar, the wind and hydro, and hydrogen is one of the recent additions, but that's more of predictions. Now, in terms of hydrogen evolution, hydrogen utilization, and green hydrogen, I mean, this is where we have to be careful about the color codes, that if it's gray, then you're not doing a big service, because you still are, after the water reform, steam reform, you still are left with the carbon-containing gases. But if it is green, then that means that you actually are using solar energy to split water and release hydrogen. So that's the greenest way of doing that. And India's target is that the green hydrogen electrolyzer capacity should reach 25 gigawatt by 2028 and 60 gigawatt by 2030. India also would be the largest producer of the green steel. Now, I'll explain in a minute what do we mean by green steel, but that also is a good news if it happens, but these are predictions. So there's a large investment in various R&D schemes by the government, hoping that India actually would be able to reach some of these targets. If you look at the industries like steel, cement, or some of the other manufacturing units, these are the largest emitters of CO2. For every ton of steel, nearly 1.8 to 2, so nearly twice the amount of, by weight, you emit carbon dioxide. That's enough to cause enormous damage to the environment, to the upper layer of the ozone layer. Now, India consumes 125 million tons of steel. India produces 125 million tons of steel. The target by now was, we are lagging behind, was 300 million tons. So if India produces actually 300 million tons of steel today, 3 times the amount of CO2 that we are producing right now, the whole world will be extremely concerned. But India is a developing nation. We need to produce more of roads, bridges, buildings, stadium, large number of civic infrastructures. And without steel, there is no way you can do that. For example, this auditorium would not stand unless you have steel reinforcement. So then we have to have a solution where you have a largest and the youngest population and a very aspiring population, growth is inevitable. And there's no escape from some of these structural components like steel. So the answer lies in pursuing the path what is known as green steel. So generally you all know that steel is produced by carbothermic reduction. You reduce iron oxide by carbon coke, and in the process you produce carbon monoxide, which reduces to carbon dioxide. But how about using hydrogen? So if you can reduce steel by hydrogen, then what you produce would be moisture. So that you're not at all doing any harm to the environment at all. But it's much easier said than done. It is not a new concept at all, in existence for maybe 5 or 6 decades already, hasn't quite happened. But partially, even Tata Steel is also using hydrogen for partial reduction of iron oxide. That is through the direct reduction, hydrogen direct reduction route, or even using in solid state direct reduction of iron ore. So that's one part. The other part is energy, where we actually should do. Much of the carbon dioxide emission, if it's coming from steel industry, the same thing happens also from the thermal power stations, where we burn coal to generate heat and produce steam, and that steam rotates the turbine, we get electricity. So one of the most benign way of producing electricity other than solar is something called solid oxide fuel cell. Not like the usual chemical batteries where you have chemical species reacting and producing electrons in the outer circuit. In solid oxide fuel cell, the two reactants coming from the anode and the cathode and reacting to produce electrons in the outer circuit are hydrogen and oxygen. And as I said earlier, the byproduct is moisture, water. So nothing can be more benign than that. But even this very concept of SOFC is in existence for, almost more than a century, but is not yet commercially viable except for a very few nations in the world. But I had the privilege of serving in a CSL laboratory in the past, Central Glass and Ceramic Research Institute, the biggest center in the country which works on SOFC and now also on solid oxide electrolyzer. That's another concept. In both the cases, now they actually are in a position to produce prototypes and even produce flexible electronic items which can be used as the anodes and cathodes to pursue this very benign way of producing electricity. Now, the next option is the solar photovoltaic, a much bigger option and something which already has been realized the world over. Think of a nation called Germany. 50 years ago, they didn't produce anything from solar almost, very little. Today, and more than 50%, nearly 50% of their energy used to come from nuclear. The government took a decision, good or right or wrong, that is debatable, but they decided, and within 30 years, today they produce more electricity from solar than any other source. And almost all nuclear power plants have been shut down. It's another fact that the neighboring nation in France produces still 80% of the electricity from nuclear. But the point remains that given a strong will, a nation can make such a huge difference. I would like to expedite now. The annual installations happening, if you look at the blue bar at the last bar diagram, last bar, 2023 data, look at the way the blue bar has increased, and the blue bar is contributed by only two nations, China and Japan. That shows the resolution of a nation. They are able to produce today more than 50% of their consumption through solar. In India, the market is expanding, but it's not anywhere close to what is desired, what is needed. So we need active strategies for energy saving building components, the active films on the windows, smart glasses, photovoltaics, thermal management, and so on. So these are drivers to take us to the net zero target for the entire nation, or so-called the green future. On the passive side, we need smart architectural design to retain the heat, building geometry, directions, climate-specific, smart thermal managements, and so on. We need mobility, and there was a time when motor car used to be considered a luxury item. Today, almost all salaried person own at least one vehicle, 2 or 4-wheelers. So in automobile sector, weight reduction is a key driver. I mean, those of you who are in this field would appreciate that the motor car that we used to see 30 years ago used to weigh much heavier than what it is today. And the weight reduction is purely possible because by way of reducing the sheet thickness, active thickness of the sheet with which you make the automobile steel. So there's a lot of material development issues involved. I'll just only mention that. As I said, there was a time when GDP was directly proportional to the steel production. Steel produced by a nation until about 50 years ago used to be a very, so if you look at the two curves, two lines, the brown one and the black one is the steel production and the brown one is the GDP growth. There used to be a direct correlation until about 50 years ago. It is no longer the same, but the fact remains that steel continues to be a major driver even for a nation like us, because as I said, we are still a developing nation. So this fact sheet shows you that how we are progressing towards the total capacity and production. So today we claim the capacity is 150 million tons plus, but we produce about 120 million tons. And these are the various products. I'll skip those details. So India's projected demand of steel is growing, as I said, and in about 10 years from now, or maybe just about 5-6 years from now, it should go to twice the amount that we are producing. So that's a very major target, and that also reminds us how important it is to come up with those green routes of steel production. The important point, the last line is very important for us to know that the global consumption rate average is 230 kilograms, and India's current rate is only 1/3 of that per capita. So that means if we want to be a developed nation, we should reach at least the world average, and that means 3 times more. And if we raise that level, then what would be the total steel production and the carbon dioxide emission? For the mobility, the answer, many of us believe, lies in the electric vehicles. I won't go into the material problems of that. All of us are aware that the major issue is with regards to the rare earth magnets. There are 4 varieties. Basically we are talking about the battery-driven, fuel cell-driven, hybrid electric vehicles, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Basically, the gearbox, the combustion engine, the gearbox and the electric motor and the control systems, they are the common in all of them. When you say hybrid, then you are bringing in combination of internal combustion alongside the energy-driven, the storage energy-driven, the battery-driven purpose. Obviously, India is not in a position to switch completely to battery-driven because of difficulties. What are these difficulties? Range, the kilometer range, the charging time, and cost. So these actually are the 4 varieties of EVs that I mentioned. You're seeing here the difference, the comparison in terms of say for example, fuel cell electric vehicle can travel 500 to 600 kilometers without recharging. Whereas hybrid electric vehicles can go up to 800 to 1.2 kilometers. 1,200 kilometers. So range is a major concern. The charging time could be, in the lower side, it could be about 3 to 4 hours. On the higher side, it could take even 20 hours. Now, you can very well imagine then you need 2 cars. If you have to charge for 20 hours, then next day you probably will have to use another car. The most important one is the cost. Electric vehicles cost a lot compared to the internal combustion engine. So these are key issues, engineering issues that need to be addressed. So without going to the engineering aspects of various components, the three lines at the bottom are very important. What are the key challenges? Rare earth element and permanent magnets, charging station infrastructure, indigenous technology for import substitution. Almost majority of the components are imported. Road and infrastructure. The present road condition is not quite conducive. The cost, market, and the comfort level. And obviously trained manpower and investments. Before I conclude, I wanted to touch just very briefly on an issue which is inevitable, unavoidable. The application or invasion of AI into our human lives. Of course, we first realized that this is an intelligence which is machine simulated and machine driven or software driven. So we want to achieve faster speed, efficacy, and novelty, but we cannot overnight replace or mimic the experiences gathered by the humanity for 6 million years. So there's a long task, it's a tall task, but there are benefits which are too alluring. Reduce human errors, automate repetitive tasks and processes, handle big data, enable faster decision making, develop AI-enabled digital assistants, deploy robots for handling risky and perilous tasks, improve processes and workflows, medical treatments including surgeries, and 24/7 operations. So we already are aware that it is not going to happen. It is happening and it's very much a part of our life. And I mean, the most important aspect which we all are aware is the ChatGPT or Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So we have to embrace. There's no escape. There's no escape from it. We have to embrace, despite the threats coming from, and key areas where the government of India already has recognized are the policing and monitoring, agriculture, analyzing data, health sector, cybercrime prevention, and data knowledge or technology access. So this is where AI is going to make a huge difference. So we are worried about two key factors here, the invasion into our privacy and social grading and technological unemployment. There is no denying the fact that while AI creates new opportunities, AI also reduces the number of manpower required. So if I want to now put everything that I presented before you into a single XY plot, then I couldn't find anything better than this description. Human Development Index, which is dependent on three key parameters: life expectancy at birth, education, living standards, as a function of per capita energy consumption. I know I must close. Yeah, just 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. So I wish I could show you with a marker. You look where India is, less than 0.5. And compared to even small nations like Norway or Iceland, USA of course, we have a much way to go. So this is the key issue, that we want to reach developed nation status. We need to grow, and that can be captured through a quantitative parameter called Human Development Index. And that can improve provided we have much better access to energy. So this energy consumption per capita has to improve without jeopardizing the nature and the environment. So I'll just say that, in my opinion, one of the reasons which actually is, as a scientist, which always is very disappointing, is the fact that we spend only 0.6% of our GDP, 0.65% of our GDP in research, 3% of our GDP in education. Way too low. And in my opinion, unless the foundation is very strong and wide, you can't build a pyramid. You will build an inverted pyramid. So this is where we have to stand, very clear. And this is my last slide. I would like to conclude saying that science is pursuing the truth relentlessly, regardless of its necessity or immediate application, because science is universal. Engineering is for providing solutions borrowing from science, and technology is the last mile which gives us all the benefits. So if India has one major resource, which I said in the beginning, that is the youngest population or the demographic dividend. If we want to empower the youth, there is no escape from empowering by education. So to be a developed nation, India needs to create an ecosystem comprising modern education, infrastructure, flexible rules, entrepreneurship, innovation, easy financing ways, tax benefits, and industry-academia linkage. The country must promote spirit and culture of meritocracy, innovation, entrepreneurship, and professional excellence in an environment of fair and ethical competition. The national academies like Indian National Academy of Engineering and Indian National Science Academy, in my opinion, have a role to play. So thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Can we have few quick questions to the speaker?
I see a hand raised here.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you are talking about the green steel and where we have to replace the coke by hydrogen. And earlier you have mentioned that water is a problem and the hydrogen in terms produced by the water. So I may feel that it is a controversy. So how will you solve that?
See, blast furnace route of steel making, iron making doesn't allow hydrogen as a reductant because the coke is not only as a reductant but also supports the entire bed. You're talking about several tens of meters height of blast furnace. Hydrogen steel or green steel can happen only in solid state reduction. So there are steel companies who already are practicing. They have reduced their coke rate. I said, if you can reduce coke consumption rate, so from emitting 1.8 million ton per million ton of steel, you'll be producing maybe half or even less. That itself also is a very major dividend that we can achieve. So hydrogen reduction of iron oxide is thermodynamically possible, very well established, but when you want to practice in the large-scale steel industry sector, it has to be done in phases and not through the usual blast furnace route.
Any more questions?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and informative talk. I'm sure there may be many questions, but we are running out of time. We would thank Professor Manna for showing the challenges and opportunities that we have and how we will look forward. So thank you again, Professor Manna, for the nice presentation.
I apologize, I have to rush immediately. Maybe
Thank you,
some other
sir.
occasion.
As a token of our gratitude, may I request Professor K.P. Sudhir, Executive Vice President, KCST, to present a memento to our speaker. Sir, please.
Now we have the second presentation on the focal theme, green energy or green future. The speaker is Professor Sebastian Peter. We all talk about, especially to the students, innovate, incubate, and become an entrepreneur. Professor Sebastian is a typical example. He has made innovations, incubated it, and he has now a startup. Dr. Sebastian received his master's from St. Thomas College. Then he did his MTech from Cochin University. PhD he did from University of Münster, Germany. He has been a postdoctoral fellow to many countries Northwestern University, USA. And he has been a Ramanujam Fellow at JNCSR. Currently, he is a professor at JNCSR. And as I mentioned, he is a co-founder of and director of Breathe Applied Sciences Private Limited, Bangalore. He has been awarded many prizes. One of the notable prizes is the CO2 reduction, National Prize on CO2 reduction and green hydrogen production, instituted by CNR Rao Foundation and ETU of JNCSR. Dr. Peter has featured among 75 under 50 scientists shaping today's India by DST and selected J.C. Bose Diamond Jubilee Lecture Award by IAM. His contributions include fixing of CO2, which is converted into valuable product. I'm not reading many of his contributions. I invite Professor Peter to give his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for kind introduction. Good afternoon. We are almost in the middle of the lunch, but I will try to make it fast. First of all, I would like to thank Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. All the three terms are well matching with my research activities. Thanks for the invitation, Professor Sudhir, and Arunatan for connecting me to the... And already I gave a talk online when the COVID was there. The previous talk covers most of the technology that can be a potential, and I take one of them. And as the title see here, integrated technology for carbon capture. Basically, I'm taking only one molecule CO2, and how that CO2, everybody, in the inauguration section also people talk about, carbon dioxide, environmental problem, climate. So these are the terms, popping up, throughout the discussions. Those who born before 1970, they did not have the car, they did not have the electricity, they did not have TV, nothing was there. Those who born probably before 80, some of the houses, maybe some cars. Those who born before 90, some television, electricity started. Those who born before 2000, slowly the mobile started. 2010, slightly moved, and we are living in the world of complete technologies. And we are, so much fancied about social media. I don't think most of you people have at least one social media, X or Facebook, Insta, etc. I am everywhere. Everybody is everywhere. And we are using extensively without knowing the impact. Yes, it is extremely good, well networked, good social media. Earlier, if you want to read a paper, first time when I was in MSc, to read the paper, I went to Cochin University to use the library at that time. Those who publish the paper, you have to send it by post. Now, you just within click, you can just submit the paper and you'll get the report. You don't have to travel anywhere. But even still, we use, vehicles. I don't think anybody doesn't have any automobile. Those who cross 18 years old, you are using. I don't think anybody is using cycle anymore. Okay, so we are living in that world. Get my mobile, two things. One is WhatsApp, second is my email. Before even going to the brushing. And you see, check who texts the message. And you reply that one. Right? And then when you reply, somebody say, hi, hello, how are you, this, etc. And then you reply that, hi, hello, how are you. If the conversation is much more, you spend more time. Last 1 to 2 years, I can see that the reels evolution, revolution, or whatever you can say that reels. And one reel drag you to the next reel, depends on the taste. And then another reel. And each reel, 1 minute, 2 minutes, it's very nice. Beautifully created. Creativity is amazingly good. At the end of the day, what do? You just keep this mobile for charging. right? And depends on how you use that the charging. You may charge, 2 times or 3 times, etc. And each time, when you charge, you are using it somewhere that, coal burned. And your high may be equivalent to 1 CO2 molecule. 1 high equivalent to CO2 molecule. And when you drive a car 10,000 kilometers, you are dumping probably 8,000 kilograms of CO2 molecule. So unknowingly, we are responsible for the climate problem, environmental issues. Okay, so somebody say that, okay, can you avoid all this? No, you should not avoid. We have to find a solution how to tackle this issue. So as a scientist, I want to show the journey that we had last 8 years, 9 years, addressing the issue. I am a chemist, basically a chemist, a material scientist. About the chemistry, that will be boring, but I won't talk much about that one. How we have addressed this problem. Then examples. The theme of this Congress, technology transfer for future. Technology transfer coming from the fundamental science. Hello. Fundamental science. And we do the deep fundamental science in our laboratory, but I'm not going to talk about the fundamental science. I just want to bring photosynthesis. Nature such a way, nature creates this, in such a way to tackle all the problems that it's the nature cycle of CO2. And you can see the plant, we feed water and use the sun. We feed water and use the sunlight and carbon dioxide. Plant is doing the job of synthesizing the food and then releasing oxygen. We are using that oxygen for our living purpose, right? And this kind of a sustainable cycle. What happened the CO2 during the development, urbanization or technology development over a period of time. And you can see that an anthropogenic CO2 dumped into the surface. And if you take it in a large way, you can see that this is connected with all this, that whatever the CO2 solar, and this extra is coming nothing from the automobile or factory emissions, etc. and all. These are all available in the Google, you can get it. So over a period of time, 400 years, 300 years, or 200 years, or 100 years, over a period of time, we got large amount of CO2 that dumped into the surface. This number, I just want to show the carbon cycle at the moment, 9.4 gigaton of CO2 that is emitting as per 2022. And if you look at that, 1.6 contributing from the deforestation. And if you just taken the forest contribution, 3.4 of that CO2 taken in the photosynthesis cycle. And then in a sequestration model, and the remaining 5.1 gigaton of CO2. This is a massive number. Every year, 5%, 10%, 20%, the release of CO2. And if you look at this picture, all the items that daily we are using, that is come from oil. Say, for example, it can be produced from oil. Whether this is the fuel for the automobiles, and you can look at the figure. Any toys, shoe, umbrella, anything you can think about that can be produced from oil. So all these kind of items producing oil, to that the energy, if you project to 2040, the energy that demand from petroleum or natural gas or coal still stands high. Renewable is slowly picking up. Nuclear is a kind of a stabilized. And if you look at the British thermal units, around 240 BTU energy recovered altogether from petroleum itself. So all this process, reduce CO2. Talking about 2015, and Chief Minister mentioned of COP29, the issues associated with that one. And you can see that one currently, the world leaders are actually pulling back from the COP15, that agreement. And here the idea is actually the temperature, the global temperature should be below 2 degrees C and limited to 1.5 degree. And there was a protocol, and before that, 1997, then after a long period, 2 decades, they decided, the world nations decided to keep an agreement to cut, the CO2 emission. And what is a carbon credit? Ton of carbon dioxide is equal to 1 carbon credit. That means, if you are not driving the car, your car, 1,000 kilometers, you are saving 1 carbon credit. Instead of driving the car, you go by bicycle and you are earning 1 carbon credit. Plant trees, and that can save 1 ton of carbon, 22 kilograms CO2 per year, and that can save 46 trees. You are earning 1 carbon credit. Or if you use saving by using renewable energy, like people talk about solar, wind, etc. and all, 1 carbon credit. Or 1 ton carbon credit can be captured, like the standard amine technology or any other technology comes turn and then again 1 carbon credit. 1 ton of carbon credit, it's nothing but you can utilize some chemicals or fuel. For example, you can make cement, bricks, etc. Or in any fuel, ethanol, methanol, or other chemicals can be produced. There are also 1 carbon credit. So it depends on how you are efficiently tackle this one. You can be the winner of carbon credit and you can gain the money. I wish this government will propose that for that one. However, I take 2 examples. Wind energy. We talk about wind energy, renewable energy. There are so many problems. People talk about we need particular geographical location. However, there are a lot of problems I cited here: land use, noise, etc. and all. Recently, I had a chat with the policymaker of United States. He came with one interesting statistics. Windmills kill thousands of bats. And these bats are actually keeping the sustainable life of the agricultural farm. Because they eat worms. The worms are actually getting more. And that is because of these reasons, the agriculture field actually getting affected. So unknowingly, this windmill is actually damaging this kind of, the ecosystem. Or if you talk about, solar energy also. And you can see that solar energy, solar panel requires a lot of land, and it can displace animals, inhabitants, etc. and all. This can be raised, there's a lot of problems. People are, social reformers working on that, how we can tackle them. If you really want to come in completely involved in this solar energy, how we can have a sustainable pot. All these cases, what I was talking about, coal or natural gas, this will form carbon dioxide. For example, if you use just a coal, 1 carbon, 1 CO2. If you are using methane, 1 CH4, 1 carbon dioxide, along with energy, 13 kilocalories of energy. That energy we are using for the energy that we are regularly using. On the other hand, if you are using diesel or petrol, you can see that C8H18, 8 molecules of CO2 producing. That's what I told. 10,000 kilometers of driving depends on the car efficiency, engine, etc. and etc. The amount of CO2 producing, it can be 8,000 kilogram or 10,000 kilogram CO2 production. So these are the sources, stationary sources. You can see the list here. Many industries, particularly cement, limestone, hydrogen, ammonia, soda, fermentation, chemical oxidation, etc. And if you go to the mobile, all the automobile industries, and natural, like humans, animal, plant, etc. But all this taken care by the proper, plantation, etc. But the first 2 columns corresponding to the creativity of the human over the several centuries, we call it as anthropogenic CO2 from these sources. And if you look at this cartoonic image video, since 1900 onwards, you can see that the circle is not exactly circle, depends on this period, November, January, February, and you can see that depends on the season, the CO2 emissions also can be different. And depends on that one, the average temperature, average ppm of CO2 is also increasing. It reached from 260, 70 to around this area. It's crossed. And it is continuing. I have taken the data from this observatory. Every day you can see that the average CO2 emission in the second decimal. And you can see that last year, January 2024 and this year, there is a difference of 1.3%, 35% of CO2 excess. Now it is 429. The best living, it should be 450. It should be stopped. Otherwise, it can be serious. This is a report by International Panel on Climate Change. And as per the report, you can see that shaded area is going to be underwater by 2050. The cities like Kochi is going to be underwater by 2050. Cities like Mumbai or Chennai is going to be underwater by 2050 if we are not taking proper attention. The case is quite serious. And the report also says, and for example, we all love fishes, most of us love fishes. If you want to have a good fish, you have to go to the deep sea. The pH of this water at the seashore, it's different. It will affect the seafood or marine life. Unknowingly, you are inviting the problems in your health system by eating the fishes from the bad water. And also the cost of the fishes increased by probably last 1 year, 2 years by double or triple, etc. and all. So there are a lot of carbon cycles. You can see that I just want to highlight this here, health system. If you look at the volume of carbon dioxide in air, 1%, you end up in drowsiness. If you go to a city like Bangalore and come back, it's quite difficult. Yes, you will end up in headache, a problem there. And if this, 3%, you started to reduce the hearing or increase heart rate and blood pressure or mild narcosis. And if it is more than 5%, dizziness, confusion, headache, and if it's going below that one, you may end up in dying. For example, recently, Delhi is reported, close to 700, 800 ppm. Most of the schools closed. Online classes started. They allowed, all the officials, to work from home because of high pollution that is coming from smoggy, particularly from the agriculture farms of, the Haryana, Punjab, that area. That is a serious case. In 2014, the US President Barack Obama mentioned that when development of India and China adds to the carbon dioxide emissions, everybody criticized, but I take it in a positive note because the development happened in these countries because of that one more CO2 emitting that one. Okay? And if you look at the per capita CO2 emissions by 2019, you can see that India and China, a big leap from 2000, 2002, etc. in both countries that's associated with the GDP. The GDP, how is the GDP it is growing? CO2 emission is also per capita is growing. And you can see that when China stabilized somewhere in 2010 or 11, and India is still going up. Again, economically, talking about this is a good sign, but sustainability, sustainable life is in a very tough manner. So if it continues, yes, we are very happy with the economy, but we are not happy in a good life. And people talk about multiple terms, carbon neutral. Carbon neutral is nothing but a carbon emission is equal to carbon removal. Okay? How much you leave to the atmosphere, are you able to pull back and then use it in a different way? Carbon neutral. Everybody talk about carbon neutrality. People talk about without understanding what is carbon neutral. Net zero. People talk about India net zero by 2070. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. I don't know how many of us will be alive at that time. Those who introduce may not be alive at that time. I have a strong feeling that it is a tough task because the kind of the development happening in the country, it's very difficult to tackle that, the amount of CO2 that is depositing. Carbon negative, if you are smart enough to have, dump more carbon dioxide that already dumped into the atmosphere, yes, that is a really great thing. People talk about sequestration. But country like India, as policy makers, they won't suggest because it's a huge infrastructure, space required. We cannot push the population to move away from one place to another place. It's not a good idea. It may be, but it is well explored, Scandinavian countries like Norway, Sweden, etc. and all. And our government introduced a 5-point pledge, zero emission by 2070, to enhance the capacity for non-fossil fuel energy to 500 gigawatt by 2030, increase the proportion of renewable energy in the energy mix by 50% by 2030, reduce the emission intensity of its economy by 45%, reduce emissions of 1 billion tons of CO2. As of now, we have 1.91 metric tons of CO2 dumping in 2022 as per the report. So these are the Panchamrit, I already talk about. Many countries talking about, even Kerala government, I also heard that 2050 it's going to be carbon net zero. And if you take a different industry sector, for example, BPCL talking about 2040, Reliance talking about 2045, and etc. and etc. Some people are, targeting all these things. In India, anyway, large scale, 2070, and people like me, I will retire at the age, 2043. Okay, so this is a word to, the young students, we need more people to work on it. Many people have to come forward for this one. I am coming from this place, only 18 kilometers from this place. Okay, so we can do the magic. If you are really passionate about doing that one, but we need a massive workforce to work beyond 2043. That means, 2070 is a carbon net zero. There are a lot of R&D plans. You can see that global reproduction plan, CO2 separation plan, CO2 capture, CO2 utilization, etc. So many, you can expand the subtitles also. And this one area, subtitles to subtitles and different areas, you can do. This is the problem of this century. You have all the opportunities to work, all the idea can be generated. I can tell you, up to 2100 also you can work the project and still you cannot solve that much difficulty hits there. Okay, so what are the different ways of artificial CO2 removal? If I take first example, CO2 sequestration, carbon sequestration, I'm not going to the detail. CO2 can be storage long time, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, and then you take in the form of some oil or fuels. Okay, you can do that one. Recently there was a competition, $100 million competition by Elon Musk, X-Prize competition. I was one of the finalists of the previous competition of X-Prize. So this is actually talking about 100 years, you dump your CO2 and then dig it out. But there are a lot of problems. I'm not reading that. CO2 fixations, and as if you are a chemist, you can store CO2 in a form of chemical and then you can use it. CO2, you take epoxide and then form polycarbonate. Carbonate, cycle carbonate or polycarbonate. You can use that one. Okay, I went to buy a bag, travel bag. Those who are buying, carry bag. I went to buy a bag, Samsonite shop. One bag is 15,000 rupees. I asked, what is the material? It's a polycarbonate. You will not get a scratch. That's a warranty, 10 years warranty. Then I went to American Tourister. The bag is actually 5,000. That is polypropylene. You will get a scratch. So it depends on the material, the efficiency or the durability is different, and that can be produced from carbon dioxide. I made it in lab. We are making in polycarbonate, and you can do that. Carbon dioxide capture. You can capture, for example, in this air, this is good air, this area. But if you go to Kochi town, probably 500, 400, depends on the area of the industry you have. You can capture at the point source, and you can use the direct capture, and all this flow stream composition, hydrogen sulfide, SOx, NOx, etc. can be removed. We did some analysis, around 700 projects all over the world working on CCUS. And you can see that, I'm not reading completely, CO2 capture, CO2 utilization, CO2 storage, And if you look at India country, and if you look at this one, carbon capture, carbon utilization, storage, direct air capture, those who are not aware about TRL, technology readiness level, that means if you are doing a synthesis in the lab, it's a basic science, and you find a solution for that one, okay, I made a compound, this is a chemical reaction, technology readiness level is 3 or 2, that range. And you take that, industrially simulate in the lab and do the test, probably you can call it as 4, 5, and you just text that in the industry level, 6, something like that. And when it is ready for the commercialization, 8, and it is a fully economical one, 9. That's the way it goes. And you can see that one, here some of them are in the 9 stages. These are the technology available in India. And there are few R&D centers. And we have also one center in JNCSR. I'm heading in the National Center for Carbon Capture and Utilization. It's a center of excellence. And then another one is, IIT Bombay. Anyway, I'm not going to the chemistry in detail, but just want to know, why the problem? CO2, why don't we convert? What is the issue? Those who are chemists here probably understand that one. Those who are actually, did some, +2 or masters or, with this chemistry as a subsidiary, CO2 is a linear molecule. It's very stable molecule. Activating CO2 is quite challenging task. Okay? So to activate that one, you create, or you design, develop the catalyst. You take CO2 at the surface of the catalyst and bend it. And then, when you bend it, the bond become longer. And when it's longer, and the CO2, the CO bond is actually breaking. And then you pass hydrogen. Hydrogen is an integral part of that one. Hydrogenate, that carbon, hydrogenate, and that carbon, methane is forming. Okay? When this one CO2, another CO2, then come together, and then CC bonding is forming. Hydrogenate, you will form ethane. Or if you just you expand a little bit, it will form ethanol. So you have to activate this CO2 molecule in such a way, designing the catalyst. A lot of chemistry involves, I'm not going to the detail. Oops, God. I will skip all these things. So, what we do atom level catalyst design to activate the CO2 molecule, that's a fundamental science, and how that efficient on par with the state of art technologies available. And we work in this all together. You can see that capture CO2 reduction, and then whatever the CO2 reduction by photochemical method, thermochemical method, electrochemical method, photochemical method, nothing but we use the sunlight. And then just use the water and CO2 molecule and convert, or thermochemical method, you heat on with the pressure, activate CO2 molecule. Electrochemical, we apply the potential, activate the molecule, and then you just get the product like methanol, CO molecule, methane, dimethyl ether. This methanol can be used in a fuel cell. Professor Vanna was mentioning about that one. This methanol, will just use the oxidation process. And when it's oxidizing, it will form in CO2 back again as a byproduct. That CO2 can be captured, and then it's a kind of a cycling of this overall technology. For all this purpose, we make the catalyst. I was talking about thermochemical, electrochemical, photochemical, and biochemical methods. During that process, we've developed the catalyst. Those who are the chemists or nanotechnology or engineers, they can understand, we control the particle size of the nanoparticle, different shapes, different substitution, etc., etc. A lot of chemistry tricks we do and develop it. Or we naturally also make it. For example, peanut shell. India is the second world largest producer of peanut. Okay, after China, you can see the number. And if we have taken this peanut shell, process, and then functionalize with the nitrogen, and we capture CO2 from the direct air with, in a good amount, and we can scale it up, even for the 100 kilogram, that material. We can test in, 1 ton, 2 ton, 3 ton capacity, CO2 capture. We are building the plants, actually. Okay, I will show some example what we are doing. These are the chemistry process. I skip. And what we did by doing all this one, in Bangalore, we made, say for example, ethylene, formaldehyde, ethanol, carbon monoxide, propanol. methanol, dimethyl ether, isobutylene, propane, hydrocarbon, methane, acetone, formic acid, acetic acid, etc. Each one has niche market. For example, isobutylene. Whatever the cosmetics we are using, the fragrance is isobutylene. Okay, isopropanol, it is a part of, sanitizer. Acetic acid, it is, vinegar. Methane, ethanol, ethylene, etc. and all, methanol can be used as a fuel. So each one has its own market. And I take one example, methanol. So I am in touch with one of Marine Department of Kerala after, this Vizhinjam airport. And this marine, looking for, methanol as an alternative fuel for diesel engines. Okay? And methanol, there are a lot of advantages. It is safer compared to other fuels, more stable than hydrogen, sustainable and versatile energy alternative for the future, renewable sources can be used, etc. Fuel cell, and then it can be blended with the gasoline, eco-friendly. One example, Niti Aayog introduced M15, that nothing but 15% of methanol can be blended with the gasoline. China introduced around 20,000 cars, M100, that purely methanol-based engines. Italy introduced A20, that is a 5% of ethanol, 15% of methanol, and then that fuel they introduced. So this is the way, they are talking about. And then followed by ethanol, also came into the picture. Now it's a dimethyl ether. If you look at the energy containing per volume, you can see that diesel and you are using extensively, or you are talking about hydrogen other side. 1 atmospheric hydrogen, you can see almost zero energy, energy contained, and you have to pressurize in a cylinder. Depends on the pressure, is 200 atmosphere, 350, 700, and liquid, and you can see that energy contained. And then you are compressing. For compressing, you need a lot of energy input. That energy is coming also from one or another energy source, and during that process also CO2 is producing. Okay, so then some were balancing that one methanol. You can see that it can keep the existing infrastructure, and then cost is pretty good, and then auto ignition temperature 467. Methanol can be blended with the water infinity, and high octane number gasoline, so 106 compared to 90 and 100, and high purity, there is no NOx and more SOx, etc. So basically it has a lot of advantages, and people talk about methanol economy in 1973, one of the leading journal Science, when the oil crisis was there, and in fact in Chicago they use methanol as a fuel. You can see that methanol fuel tank here filling. However, followed by the ethanol production or ethanol-based E10, fuel that was, progress in United States. It did not go. And then Professor George Ollah got Nobel Prize in 1991 for his carbonate chemistry. And his student Surya Prakash is a Bangalorean. He joined for his PhD and he never left his boss until he died. And he is a faculty continuing. And they started plant in Iceland. You can see that one. They used the geothermal electricity. And this was first commissioned in 2012, when start 2007, and when it continued and matured, 2015, with a capacity of 4,000 ton of methanol per year, and they use high pressure and geothermal electricity. The electricity, geothermal electricity, almost negligible cost, and if you want to bring that plant to anywhere outside of Iceland, it is quite difficult, economically it's not favorable. The catalyst made by Johnson Matthey way back in 70s and 80s and modified by these two gentlemen. And then another plant in Germany, they also produce CO2 from this one of the coal power plant, and we just continued our the research activities. These are all fundamental science. We publish various journals, around 40 publications we have in CO2 based papers, only CO2, and 12 patents also available for the CO2 reduction technologies. So if you take the amount of gram of methanol, if you look at the numbers space-time yield, 1 gram of catalyst in 1 hour, how much gram of methanol producing, that is a fundamental calculations we have done. And we scale up the catalyst. You can see that there is a X prize patent. We scale up this catalyst 70 kilogram in our lab for testing a plant of 500 kilogram of CO2 that we are going to commission this month in Telangana. I will show that one. So how you develop that one? We start a company. That's what Professor Jaya is talking about. We started a company in 2016 to translate this one. We had a beautiful journey, starting with Karnataka State Government Best Startup Award, Indian Government's Best Startup Award, series of awards, and then along with that one, our technology evaluated by national and international agencies. We have the ISO certificate from 350 Solutions. You can just Google it and download, and the technology, you can get it in your mobile, whatever the technology we did. And we also got, in life cycle analysis done by University of Calgary, and then endorsed this can be carbon neutral technology with the condition if the hydrogen is coming from the renewable source. Okay? And then we also listed out in India's climate tech landscape only the 2 companies from India. One is ours, and then Carbon Clean Solution. This is a company, carbon capture company, started by 2 IIT Kharagpur BTech students. They built a plant, 170 ton of CO2 capture plant in Tuticorin. And then they moved to UK and they built multiple plants over there because of business opportunities. Anyway, so we built this one. First is CO2 capture. Initially we built with help of partner, Carbon Clean Solution. We partnered in at that time. Now we are building ourselves. CO2 reduction technology we build ourselves. And fuel cell and recycling, methanol distillation. Finally we made hydrogen electrolyzer also. We commissioned 120 nm cube per hour capacity plant in Bangalore and 60 nm cube per hour capacity plant in Telangana. We developed our own material and then scaled up for this one. And then integrated finally all together. And this is our plant in Bangalore in our research campus. This is a capacity of 300 kilogram of CO2 per day to methanol. And this is tested by BPCL. Tested by Department of Science and Technology, tested by Shell. Our catalyst was taken by Shell and they tested their facility and they gave the data because sometimes you have to match with the industry, what they are thinking. So you can see that from here, this is the reactor number 7 and you can see that number 12 and my student is collecting methanol. And we got interesting result. Based on that when we did economic analysis with the help of, we have a tie-up with the Midcon company in Pune. They do the EPC, they do the economic analysis. Based on the calculation they have done, the methanol cost, production cost, 20 to 24 rupees per liter, depends on the input they are giving. And the market cost, approximately 35 to 45. Normal methanol, if it is a green methanol, it's a 65 rupees per liter. And you can look at the market opportunity. If you look at that Asian Pacific region, it's approximately 36.3 billion market. And we are importing 90% of methanol from China or Iran. So only 10% or less than 10%. So we have a huge opportunity if you have a technology that is developed by this country at this moment. Okay, so this is a plant. This is the 650 megawatt power plant in Telangana, STPP, Singareni Thermal Power Plant. And this one plant is producing 22,000 of CO2 per day. And we are building a plant of 1 ton per day capacity plant. We did everything. What we do from this chimney, we capture CO2, our CO2 capture technology. We produce hydrogen on spot by pump-based electrolyzer. We build a reactor with a capacity of, so 1 ton capacity, around 3 kilometer distance here. This project started 2020-21 and then within a week or 2 weeks, we are going to commission the plant officially. So this, then we extended this, projected the data. There is only 1 ton. If you project with whatever the data available, we projected to 5,000 ton. If you project 5,000 ton, the cost of methanol per liter, you can get probably 13 rupees, 14 rupees per liter. When you scale it up, it is not a linear scaling. And you can see that one when people are trying to work on this one, some DP are going here and there, including Niti Aayog. So, extending the project, we are also working with them in Tata Steel, CO2 to gasoline, CO2 to CO and then gasoline. We are also working with them in sugar industry, CO2 to ethanol process. So sugar industry, the advantage is the food grade. This is fermentation process. Each sugar industry produces around 22, 32, 40 ton of CO2 per day capacity, medium size sugar industry. And if you look at the belt of UP, around 80 sugar industries, or Maharashtra around 50 to 60 sugar industries. So we are also working with the BPCL, CO2 to methanol, and dimethyl ether. And we already signed an agreement with the Sadhguru for 20 ton per day CO2 to methanol capacity. And then finally we just started CO2 to ethylene process by electrochemical HP. And we signed an agreement. We started the project also. So I will just take another 5 minutes and then, or maybe less than that one. So a few more. CO2 to syngas. If you go to the biogas plant, there is a CO2 and then methane together. And methane, can be used as the production of hydrogen and then internally, and then it produces this reaction, dry reforming methane or reverse water gas shift reactions or reverse Borgard reactions, etc. And then it will produce, carbon monoxide or carbon nanotube. We can make it. CO2 to carbon. We made this carbon nanotube and it has a good market. Many people also work on this area. Or diamond. My student, got some, result of this diamond, and then I never believed that one. But within a month, a paper came in Nature, CO2 to diamond that produced at 1200 degree. That is very interesting result. Or dimethyl ether. There is a Korean company, Kogas. They produce dimethyl ether and good amount of, major part of, energy in certain, towns in Korea is actually, dimethyl ether. We also in Indian government proposed dimethyl ether along with the LPG that can reduce the cost at least 100 rupees. As of now 800 rupees or 812 rupees per cylinder. It can be reduced if it efficiently utilized, and then energy efficiency also will be higher. Or it can be gasoline like a C6 to C12 carbons, diesel kind of chemicals can be produced. Or finally, it can produce sustainable aviation fuel. In principle, whatever CO2 that emitting, if you have a smart technology, you can produce all these chemicals by utilization technique. So I just advertise myself. We have a Center of Excellence in JNCSR. I'm heading that one. So where we do the fundamental science, engineering package, we do a lot of simulations like CFD or Aspen program and the reactor design. And then technology starters, and then good networking, economic analysis, we do life cycle analysis, etc. It's a kind of a network, those who are the stakeholders working in the area of a CCU, carbon capture and utilization. And I would like to thank all the funders, sponsors, who generously supported from the beginning. And all my collaborators, you can see there is a huge number of collaborators involved at the journey last 8-10 years, and mostly my students. They are the real backbones of this technology developments. To be honest, they are the future, and many are holding now the position. One first student joined IIT Kanpur, another student joined in IIT Bombay, and one joined in HP, and one joined in NTPC, and joined in Johnson Matthey. So the list goes. So they are scattered all over the world and promoting this research in their capacity. So finally, I would like to thank again for this nice opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you.
We can have one or two quick questions.
Thank you, sir, for this enlightening presentation. So I just have a common question. You have shown a lot of technologies to capture the carbon dioxide. So you are telling 2070 is very far. I think it might be very challenging to achieve even during that period. So what do you feel, like realistically, whether with current technology, what are the hurdles to reach a carbon neutral phase by 2070 at least for India? So your comments on that. Thank you.
Number one, the belief. If you have the belief, you have the smart ideas, you can do it, but that's not sufficient. So you need a lot of support from the government sectors. The policymakers should also think about the seriousness. So for example, when COVID happened, it was the survival thing. When the survival, was there, important, everybody put a lot of effort to find the vaccine, at that time. Now, we are okay with that one. Even, we don't know when it is actually, real problem happen. If it is a real problem, there is no, point of existence. At that time only we will do. But before doing that one, if the government is coming from very strict norms, so for example, starting with the industries, okay, this is the mandate. Whatever the carbon dioxide that emitting to the air, you should take care about that one. If they are emitting, so for example, I told, one 600 megawatt plant, power plant producing almost, 22,000 tons of CO2 per day. Okay, so instead of emitting that one, if they can come with their own technology to capture and utilize them for something else, it can be sorted out. And then you're talking about, the automobile, industries. And nobody wants to change their engine, for methanol or any other fuels because it's a huge investment. But if you force them, no, you cannot do without that one. Yes. So policy is the one of the concern. And secondly, we don't have, particularly in India, we don't have much workforce, to tackle this one. And if many, coming forward, I can tell you this is an important, challenging problem in this century. And you have huge opportunities. Those who are actually going to touch in this area, you will enjoy. Enjoy means solving the problems that you are facing with your research activities. If all together coming together, well, we can do something, but at the same time, the growth is so fast. Growth is so fast. How many roads in Kerala itself, you can see that one. When I was traveling from, Cochin airport yesterday, every place, one or other overbridge is coming. It involves steel, it involves cement, and then blocking the traffic, and when a car stops in a traffic for 5 minutes, how much CO2 emit? If the car is not stopping, that much amount of CO2 less. The development is happening, and the development, and we cannot stop it, and we are really in a faster mode. But very difficult to tackle. To be honest, policymakers are very crucial in this case. Yeah. Yes.
How it is going to implement in India, or how it is implemented in Western countries or USA?
Yeah.
And second thing is, you are talking about the carbon dioxide conversion into diamond. So is it a easier technology, or what is the process going on in that conversion?
Okay. The first one, carbon credit, government in the higher level, they are coming with a certain what you call policy document. I am also part of some task force of, the carbon net zero. We recommended to the cabinet whether this can be implemented. So, but it needs an approval from the higher authority. They are working on that one. My guess, this decade it will be a serious case. So carbon credit will be imposed. Regarding diamond, you need a high temperature. Typically, diamond formation artificially, you need a 2000 to 3000 degree. Okay. What we got, 1200 degree. Even the paper that Nature published also 1200 degree. There is a chemistry. The chemistry is nothing but the silica, the quartz. The quartz actually heating at 1200, it is acting as a eutectic mixture. It's a eutectic, the liquid point, it is absorbing the CO2 and then breaking CO bond. And the oxygen is emitting as oxygen, and then carbon is stacking at the surface. That's a mechanism proposed. And we are trying to understand whether this is a realistic mechanism. We have to do the It's a purest form. It's a purest form. So there is a project by Nobel Prize winner and then in Netherlands, he got $10 million euro project breaking CO2 to carbon and oxygen. This oxygen, if you break this carbon dioxide in a planet like Mars or somewhere, other planets, wherever the abundant CO2, you can produce oxygen. Benjamin List, I was
think-
not getting Benjamin List. So Benjamin List, this is one of the problems, so oxygen can be produced. And if one of the problem, oxygen is not there, so water is also not there. So, but at least, you can produce oxygen. One of the problems to have a livable space in the planet. So this mechanism is such a way CO bond is breaking and then carbon is.
Yeah, Professor Sebastian will be available during lunch break. You can interact with him. Let us thank Professor Sebastian for an exciting lecture. And I hope that before